Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ACT Prep. This is our second class session where we'll be focusing on getting ready for the ACT English portion of the test. If you joined us for our first class, you know that we did a general ACT overview, and I really hope you have a chance to look at that video. It's just going to give you some information on how the test is divided up, how they grade the test, different testing sessions that you can sign up for to get more information about how you did on the test. Different scores that competitive schools are looking for, or scores that optimize the scholarship dollars that are offered to you, and also the types of schools that you can get into. So I hope you have a chance to look at that. I think it's really good general information. We also covered some strategies for taking the ACT test, things that will help you on every section of the test. And now we're going to start to focus in on each portion of the test, with this English portion coming first. I hope that you can join us in person once in a while so I can kind of get to know you, help you a little bit. If you have any questions about applying for college, financial aid, things like that. We did talk about the FAFSA in some of our live classes. It would just give me an idea of what you're aiming for and some of the ways that we could help you going forward. I know that I took some lumberjack scholarship, that's for NAU, to one of the students over at the Loft. But if you know what school you're trying to get into and you want some more help kind of going down that avenue or whatever, please let us know. We're here to help you. If I'm referring to the red ACT manuals throughout this, which we do a lot if you're in the in-person classes, those are available to you at the Loft and the Lodge. You can just ask at the front desks. They know exactly where those are. And at the end of this video, I will be giving you the page numbers that we'll be using next week whenever we actually take a practice English test out of the ACT book. I'll tell you what page we're looking at, where to get the answers from, and where to do the score conversion so that you would know what the composite ACT score for you is on the English part of the test. All right. And if you have any questions, of course, always let me know. Reach out to somebody at the Loft or the Lodge, and they should be able to get a hold of me. We really want to help you in your journey to going to college. We're so excited for you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my video here and share my screen. We're going to just jump right into this ACT English prep. And first, we're going to talk about why do we even focus on English in the ACT test. You might not think of it this way, but most of you have probably been practicing English your entire life. It's a subject that you're probably really good at just because you've been doing it almost forever. So it's really one of the sections of the test that you can use to maximize that overall composite score. Remember that how you do on each section of the test kind of gets added together and divided by 4 for that composite score. And the English section is a really great place to kind of maximize and upgrade that composite score. One of the reasons that's true is because it just feels a little less rushed for time than the other sections of the test. The math test feels very hurried, and the reading and the science are particularly stressful when it comes to time management. They're the hardest ones to actually finish, to actually get a chance to look at each and every question. But the English test seems to have a little bit more time on it. Students often report that they're able even to go back and review a few of their answers. If they have any time to spare, it's usually on this part of the test. So this is one that we really want to optimize as much as we can to bump up that composite score. And to do that, we're just going to review a lot of the rules that maybe we're a little bit rusty on going forward here. All right, the timing of the English test. Typically, you will have about 30 seconds to answer each question, and that's going to leave you with a little bit of time at the end to review. When I talked about getting a digital watch to use for the ACT test, it's going to be really critical on things like this because you're going to want to make sure that you aren't spending any more than about 9 minutes per passage on the English part of the test. This is something that you're going to want to know and remember before you go into it. And a digital watch will really help you do that. You can just kind of glance at it, calculate when the 9 minutes ends, and keep peeking at your watch as you're going forward. Now, remember that I did tell you that the ACT folks are pretty strict If an alarm goes off on your digital watch or something, sometimes they will invalidate your test or even escort you from the room. So make sure you have a silent digital watch. They don't let smartwatches in. Just make sure it's nice and quiet. But this way you can really keep track of your own seconds and minutes, which is really critical on the ACT test. We talked yesterday about how the ACT test in and of itself as a standardized test is not incredibly difficult. What makes it difficult are the time constraints. That's really how they make it a tough test. On the English, verify why an answer is correct. Don't always just go with your gut, because some details in that answer may actually make it incorrect. So even if you feel like you know what the right answer is right away, do verify that. What is the rule backing that up? What is the verb tense that you're looking for and why? Something like that. Verify why it's correct so that you're not rushing and making silly mistakes. You do have time on this test. All right, the ACT is really focused on 4 main areas, I would say, on this part of the test for English. Complete sentences, hugely important to the ACT. Also, they want things to be consistent, they want them to be clear, and they want them to be concise. They are testing your editing skills as much as your grammar, and really making sure that you know how to use language well and effectively. If you're a good writer, you're probably going to do great on this English part of the test. And if you're not, these are always skills that we can work on. So what do these 4 C's for the ACT mean? Complete, very simple here. Just make sure that your sentences that you're answering are complete. You don't want to see any fragments in there. In other words, you don't want a sentence to be lacking a subject, verb, or not have a main idea. You don't want any run-ons. That's 2 complete sentences jammed together. You don't want any glaring punctuation errors. You want that to be correct. Consistent on the ACT just basically means matchy-matchy. The really fancy word for that in English is parallelism, but pretty much we just want to make sure things are matchy-matchy. Is the meaning clear? Is there any way you could edit it to be clearer? Could you cut out some extra words? Could you cut out a little bit of the redundancy in there? I know that often we talk about writing English papers or whatever, and they can get a little bit wordy. Sometimes because we're trying to meet that word count, and sometimes because we're trying to sound smart. The ACT is really against that. They're going to try to get you to cut that out as much as possible. Can you break it down and make the meaning clearer? And then finally, concise. All that means is to be brief and to the point. That's why I have this little guy jumping up toward the doorknob here so that you can remember short. The ACT English test, I would say, is obsessed with short. If you can look at that list of answers and you see the shortest answer there and you know that it's correct, mark that one and move on. They really are obsessed with matching and shortness. All right, this information is all from the Princeton Review, Cracking the ACT. They have some great information regarding getting ready for the ACT, and I really like some of the things that they use for English. And they break it down into 4 steps, which if you practice enough, these should become very routine to you. But the first step is just identifying the topic. If you look at number 1 there, if you look at what's different through all of those, you can see that what they're actually testing you on there is commas. Where do the commas go? So if you know your comma rules or how commas function, or you've reviewed that a little bit, you are going to know the topic of this answer and how to proceed through that. So here we are, commas. There are a lot of different answers to what the topic might be, but in this one, it's commas. Next, we're going to use the process of elimination. Can we get rid of a couple of these answers and really narrow down what might be correct? And sometimes it's fastest just to kind of breeze through all of them and cross out the ones that wouldn't work at all. We already know that American author Junot Diaz is not really a great introductory phrase. It's very important information. So we don't want that comma there. So we're just going to eliminate A right off. And then Junot Diaz, if we use the commas just around that, that means we could eliminate his name, which really does subtract a lot of the meaning from the sentence. So we don't want to subtract meaning from the sentence. We need his name in there. Using that process of elimination kind of just bumps us down to B and C. And I can't think of any reason to use a comma after author. That would be getting rid of American author because we would be using a comma to sort of set off that introductory phrase. An American author is not an introductory phrase. It's important information that adds to the meaning of the sentence. So we don't really need any commas in the sentence. We can just straightforwardly say, American author Junot Diaz was born in the Dominican Republic. All of it is necessary information. Nothing can be deleted or cut out, so we can just go with C. Next, use context whenever you're answering these. Just because will add is underlined doesn't mean that the rest of the sentence is something that we can kind of ignore when we're answering it. We need to know the context because they're asking us, if you look at the topic of number 2, they're asking us about verb tense. The only way we're going to know what tense to use is to know when the sentence is set. And it says after Diaz won the 2008 prize. So we know that we're set in the past. So all we need to really look for is our past tense verb. We're adding is kind of making it sound like it's continuously going on or something else was going on while they were adding things to the curriculum. That's not really what we're looking for. If we use our past tense verb to match the context of after he won, then the sentence just reads, after Diaz won the 2008 prize, many college literary courses added his works to the curriculum. And that's correct. And we just use context to get to that answer. Finally, trust your ear, but verify. I mean, if you think that we're adding might kind of sound good, you might just need to dig a little deeper into your verb tenses and kind of verify for yourself why you wouldn't be using were adding instead of added. So trusting your ear is so important on this English part of the test. But anytime you can, if you can kind of nail down the rule for that, verify it for yourself. All right, a very important note on the English part of the ACT test, don't fix what isn't broken. I know a lot of times students second guess themselves, and if a section of words is underlined, they figure there must be something wrong with it. But actually, people have done a lot of research into the ACT test, and more often than not, no change is the correct response. Actually, 25 to 40% of the time, that is the correct answer. And that's why in the first class, we talked a little bit about on the English part of the test, using A and F as your letters of the day, because they'll always be the first option on the answer sheet. And you'll notice that as we get to looking at the English test together. But don't feel like you have to fix every sentence. A lot of times, no change is the correct answer. All right, finally, don't forget to read the titles of the passages that you're looking at. Those titles are going to be telling you what you're about to read, and they are setting your brain up for understanding. So take just a half a second and read that title. It will tell your brain, hey, I'm about to read a story about dogs. I'm about to read something about intergalactic space. I'm about to read something about road conditions in India. That setting up your brain for understanding is so important to saving time. Then it's not guessing what it's reading about halfway through the passage. You're going to know what you're reading about as soon as you read that title. Those are important clues. Don't leave them on the table. All right, now we're just going to review some of the English skills that may be a little bit rusty. Sometimes in high school, you guys are busy reading those really fantastic, important novels and writing exciting papers. And some of our grammar and punctuation skills might fall by the wayside. Maybe we're not doing as many worksheets to kind of practice and keep the rust off as we could be. So we're just going to review some of these very basic skills that you will be tested on the ACT. And a lot of times this is the list of things that they're checking on this test. Verbs, subject and verb agreement. In other words, do the two match and go together? The tense, is it proper? Irregular verbs. They're going to check you on the pronouns. Are they consistent with the nouns they're replacing? They're going to check you on the pronoun case. In other words, do you know to say my friends and I took the train instead of my friends and me took the train? And then they're going to be checking you on modifiers like adjectives and adverbs. So first we're going to review punctuation. We have a couple of different types of punctuation that we can refer to as stop punctuation and go punctuation. And stop punctuation is used with complete ideas. If you don't use stop punctuation, your ideas wreck into each other. You have a punctuation problem, which is making a bigger problem. And we're going to look at how we can use stop punctuation to fix run-on sentences and things like that. So in this first example, we still had to bake her cake. It was almost midnight before we finished. This is a run-on sentence. These are two sentences that have wrecked together because the person writing it has not used the correct stop punctuation. And actually, you could probably use any of those, period, semicolon, question mark, or exclamation mark, to fix some of these depending on the meaning that you were intending with the sentence. But we could use a period to separate these two complete ideas. We could say, we still had to bake her cake, period. It was almost midnight before we finished, period. Or we could technically just separate it with a semicolon since the ideas are closely related. A lot of times we like something on one side of a semicolon to be a bit shorter than this, but it would not be incorrect to go ahead and use a semicolon to separate these two. We could say we still had to bake her cake, semicolon, it was almost midnight before we finished. Hopefully they're going to give you option 1 on the ACT, but if you only had one or the other to pick from, you could choose either, they would be right. In other words, we're using this stop punctuation to separate these two complete ideas. Just to review, a fragment is an incomplete idea. In other words, it's a so-called sentence, but it's lacking a subject and verb with a complete thought. If it doesn't express a complete thought, even if it has a subject and a verb, then it's a fragment. It is not a complete sentence if it doesn't express a complete thought. And here's an example of that. Before we could even respond to her question. Now, that introductory word actually kind of creates a fragment, but also we don't know anything else about it. What happened before we could even respond? Did something go on? Did somebody get run over or knocked down in the crosswalk? What happened in this sentence? We don't know. We have a subject and a verb, but we are lacking complete thought. And your comma tells you, hey, slow down, take a breath, take a pause. I'm adding meaning to this sentence. And the period is separating two very complete ideas. He's saying, stop. Stop right now. All right, go punctuation. Commas, colons, and single dashes. We don't study colons and single dashes and how to use them in school very often, so I'm going to throw that out there here in a minute just because it will come up on your ACT test usually. And there's a specific rule that you can remember so that you can pick up those points on your ACT test. But as far as commas go, they can link complete ideas if they're paired with a fanboy. And in case you've forgotten what a fanboy is, it's just an acronym for these words: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. And a comma and a fanboy can link two complete ideas. The roads were icy, comma, so we waited until Saturday morning to go shopping. You couldn't just say the roads were icy, we waited until Saturday morning. But if you add a comma and a fanboy, you can suddenly link two complete ideas instead of having a run-on sentence. And another example is, I love dill pickles, comma, but these ones taste too sweet. In other words, we are linking two complete ideas. I love dill pickles, these ones taste too sweet. We can link two complete ideas with a comma and a fanboy. And don't forget that the comma always comes before the fanboy. I know that I've seen some students get confused and throw the comma after the fanboy, but remember, it's always comma, fanboy. The comma comes first. Also, commas can link an incomplete idea with a complete idea, and they can do that in either order. Commas do a lot of work, and they're actually very flexible. And here's an example of your incomplete idea coming first. After Snowball stopped dancing, the trainer gave the dog another treat. All right, so we have our incomplete idea and then our complete. And then we have it reversed. Snowball rocked out to Lady Gaga, oblivious to the growing crowd of fans. So we have our complete idea linked to our incomplete idea. It really doesn't matter which one comes first. They can be in either order. As long as one is incomplete and one is complete, you can link them with a comma. Next, always use commas in lists. Don't forget that a list of only two items is completely fine. It means that you can kind of reverse those two items. If you have reversible two items, you can put a comma there. So an example of that is, Snowball prefers songs with a regular, comma, funky beat. If I can reverse funky and regular, I can separate them with a comma, and I should. It means there are two items in a list. I could also say with a funky, comma, regular beat, and the meaning would be exactly the same. Also, if you have 3 items in a list, you always need to use a comma between the last and the next to last item in the list. And that's called an Oxford comma. Sometimes it's called a serial comma. And that just means we're not accidentally combining 2 things that don't belong together. Lady Gaga and Queen are 2 different things. Lady Gaga and Queen is not one thing lumped together. And that extra comma there, that Oxford comma, will tell you that. This is what it looks like in a list: A, comma, B, comma, and C. Always throw that in there. And this too tells you how to use the Oxford comma. We invited the rhinoceri, comma, Washington, comma, and Lincoln. In other words, we invited 3 different entities. Without it, we invited rhinoceri, and one of the rhinoceros was Washington and the other one was Lincoln, okay? It makes Washington and Lincoln into rhinoceri, which makes no sense at all. So you need to make sure you use the Oxford comma to keep items that should be separated separate. All right, commas, we also use them around unnecessary information. Unnecessary information is information that you could take scissors to and completely cut out of your sentence, and it would still have the exact same meaning. So if we took out the comma information in this first sentence, including cockatoos, our sentence would be exactly the same. We could just say, further research has shown that parrots can dance in perfect sync to music. We don't need to include cockatoos. It's the same sentence without that. It might add more detail, but it doesn't change the meaning. We also use a comma after an introductory phrase. Thanks to my mom's sewing skills, comma, I always wore handmade clothing. I always wore handmade clothing is a complete sentence, but the introductory phrase, thanks to my mom's sewing skills, tells you a little bit more about why I always wore handmade clothing. It's just introductory information giving you more meaning to the second part of that sentence there. And finally, the special little rule about colons and single dashes, since we don't usually memorize these in school, and these are very easy points that you can pick up on the ACT, are that they can link a complete idea, and they can link it to either an incomplete or another complete. It doesn't matter. But here's the key. The complete idea must come first, okay? So if you see a colon or a single dash question on your ACT, just make sure the complete idea comes first. And here's what that would look like with a colon. Parrots don't respond well to genres with the least noticeable upbeat, colon, waltzes and salsa. So we have our complete idea first. And then the second example is a waltz is particularly difficult. It follows a 3-beat pattern. So there we have 2 complete ideas, but we also have the complete idea first, okay? So as long as the complete idea is first, it's fine if the second idea is also complete. You could use either of those separately. A waltz is particularly difficult. It follows a 3-beat pattern. Remember the colon and single dashes rule, and you'll get an extra point or 2 on the ACT. All right, conjunctions and other words. Other words that act like conjunctions make an idea incomplete. And this is those list of words. These are ones to always key into if you see them. Although, as, because, if, since, that, until, what, which, while, when, where, who, and whom. Now, these are wonderful words to use in your writing. They can really make ideas flow well together and make your writing sound really professional and excellent. But know that if you add one of these, you can make an idea incomplete, or you can take one of these out to make an incomplete idea suddenly complete. So in this example, the African gray parrot, comma, which also mimics human speech and therefore can dance, that sentence suddenly, it's not working. What can we take out to make it a complete sentence? Well, if we just take out the comma and the which, it becomes suddenly a complete idea. The African gray parrot also mimics human speech and therefore can dance. So you're good to go just by taking out that word that acts kind of like a conjunction. All right, and then we have the videos of snowball dancing have sparked a serious area of study. Researchers admit they appreciate the sheer entertainment value. Here we have a run-on sentence. Its more technical term is like a comma splice. But if we add although to the beginning of the sentence, then we have just an introductory idea that suddenly makes it fine. We're just adding a little more information. Although the videos of snowball dancing have sparked a serious area of study, researchers admit they appreciate the sheer entertainment value. All right, a quick review of possessives. In pronouns, we don't need an apostrophe, okay? IT apostrophe S versus ITS without an apostrophe. IT apostrophe S always stands for it is. It's a contraction of two words. That apostrophe just tells us that the letter I is missing. We don't have that in it. If we're saying that something belongs to something else, we do not need the apostrophe, which gets a little confusing because we often use apostrophe S to show ownership of other things, but we don't do that with pronouns. So an example of that would be St. John's is a city known for its athletic citizens. Those citizens belong to the city of St. John's, no apostrophe S. If I had an apostrophe S there, it would say, it's a city known for it is athletic citizens, which of course makes no sense. The dog lost it is ball in my backyard. That's how that first sentence is reading. So we need to make sure we get rid of that. The dog lost its ball in my backyard. Get rid of that apostrophe in that pronoun. All right, they also make things possessive, as we just said. If it's a singular noun, super simple rule, you're just adding an apostrophe S, the dog's toy. If it's a plural noun, you need the S plus the apostrophe or ES plus the apostrophe if the singular version ends in S. All right, this gets a little bit confusing and we always feel like second guessing ourselves on these. But in this example, the boys' baseball is the baseball that belongs to two or more boys, okay? Picture a whole bunch of boys on a baseball field. Somebody cracks it out of the park. The baseball lands, somebody picks it up. Whose is this? It's the boys' baseball. Or the dresses' buttons, which is the buttons on two or more dresses. Maybe they're fancy antique buttons on a whole bunch of dresses that are in a row. But we are adding the ES plus the apostrophe since our singular version, dress, already ends in an S. And then a quick review of there versus there versus there. This is another easy point alert that usually they will be testing you on. THEY apostrophe RE is just indicating that it's two words stuck together. It's they are, all right? So anytime you see that apostrophe, you're looking at actually two words. THEIR is just the possessive form of they. That's their spotted dog. And then THERE, remember that is a place. And here's a great little diagram of that. If you have a hard time remembering, just picture the little person in there. That belongs to somebody, okay? The there with the arrow is pointing to a place. I've been there before, or we went there for lunch. And then the one with the apostrophe, just remember it with the little a. That's what that means. They are. All right, a note about parallelism. ACT, like I said, is obsessed with things being matchy. They will check you on this a whole lot. And here are the areas that they will be checking you on. They have a few different ones. So number one, you're going to use the same pattern of words for two or more words or ideas in a sentence. So patterning and matchy, kind of the same thing. Things in a list should take the same grammatical form. Word pairs and conjunctions should always match. And if a preposition appears on one side of a conjunction, it has to appear on the other. And here's some examples of what that looks like. So the same pattern of words, two or more words. LeBron James is known to dunk, steal, and blocking the basketball. How can we make blocking match dunk and steal? We just need to change it to kind of like the simple present tense. So dunk, steal, and block. All right, just get rid of that ing. Second one, Martin Luther King is admired for his courage, his dedication, and being intelligent. Well, how do we make being intelligent matchy with his courage and his dedication? Well, we just need to say his intelligence, and suddenly those three phrases match. The ACT English section challenges students and is frustrating to them, challenges and frustrates. All right, then suddenly we have two verb forms matching. And then finally, the mixed martial artist was complimented not only for his tenacity, but also in his technique. Well, we already said that our prepositions need to match. So for his tenacity needs to match with for his technique. Just get rid of that in and make it a for. And these are some actual ACT examples from retired tests, letting you know how interested they are in things matching up. So, number one, others salt-encrusted sleep in ancient caverns, waking after centuries to feed and to be bred. How do we make to be bred match to feed? So if you look at our options there, to breed matches to feed. They just want you to go to the simple infinitive phrase, and it doesn't matter if you know what it means or not. You're just looking to match to be bred to the earlier part of the sentence. So to feed and to breed go together. On number two, unsurprisingly, the diligent student completed his homework punctually, studied the material thoroughly, and his presentations were delivered well. Well, how do we make his presentations were delivered match with completed his homework and studied the material? We're just looking for the past tense of those verbs without any helping verbs. So I look down at my list of options and I see that delivered matches completed and studied. Then we have past tense on all of them. So we have completed, studied, and delivered. All right, one more. Because Matt does not get enough sleep, he has difficulty focusing and to stay alert. How do we make to stay match focusing? Well, I just need to say staying. Staying and focusing match. So matchy. All right, a review of adverbs and adjectives, because they will test you on this very frequently on the ACT English test. We kind of need to know these parts of speech and how they work together. What's the difference between an adverb and an adjective? The difference is in what they modify or what they give you more information about. And adverbs give you more information about verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. Adverbs really do a whole lot of work. And if you can kind of tell what word they are looking at, you will know if it's an adverb or an adjective. So here's an example of an adverb modifying a verb, dancing gracefully. Gracefully is the adverb telling you what kind of dancing is going on. An adverb modifying an adjective would be an incredibly boring book. What kind of book? A boring book. So that's an adjective. What kind of boring? Incredibly boring. So if I'm modifying an adjective, I have to be an adverb, incredibly. And then an adverb modifying another adverb. Notice how she walks extremely slowly. All right, slowly is an adverb. That's how she walks. But extremely is telling us more about how slowly. So there I have an adverb modifying another adverb. So a lot of times when you have an adverb modifying another adverb, you're going to see two ly words appear together. And then adjectives modifying nouns or pronouns, that's their job. They have a much simpler job. Basically, adjectives tell us more about a thing, usually something that we can touch or put our hands on. So a graceful dance, a boring book, a slow walker, okay? So here's a really tough example from the ACT test. This is why we kind of need to know what word another word is looking at. Then we know what its job is, what type of word it is, so we know what form it should take. On each wing, all flighted birds have 10 primary flight feathers, each one shaped slight different. Now, how are we going to change slight different? We already know that F is incorrect. That sounds terrible. We know we have a problem. But what kind of a job are these two words doing? What is different talking about? Well, it's talking about how something is shaped. Okay, so it should be an adverb. So differently would be our adverb there. But what is slight talking about? If slight is talking about another adverb, it must be an adverb. So we have two adverbs stuck together. So what would be the correct answer on that? It would be H, slightly differently, okay? Differently shaped and then slightly differently. And I know that that's a little bit of a tough one because it doesn't sound quite right to our ear, but I think if you read the other options, you'll think that it sounds better than the others. And actually, it's the one that's correct. We have two adverbs doing some work in this sentence. Another really easy points alert, of versus have. You may see this once or twice. Could have, should have, would have doesn't exist. That's what our ear thinks it's hearing, but actually it's hearing could have, should have, would have. And those can be shortened to could have, would have, should have. And those are just contractions. Our ears are hearing the word of, but it's actually the word have that's going on there. Remember that of is just a preposition. It's never a verb. And have is a helping verb. So I could have bought a dog. Sounds like could of, but it's actually could have. And then finally, be aware of all of these except, least, and not questions on the English test. They're a little bit tricky and you may have to take just a few more seconds to answer those ones correctly. I find that the quickest, easiest thing to do is cross off the three answers that are correct, and the one that's left is the right answer, which I know sounds confusing. But as long as you're paying attention to the fact that it says except, least, and not, reading those questions very carefully, you should be good. You're just kind of looking for the wrong answer in there. All right, so we have had our first class, which, like I said earlier, was just our ACT prep and general overview of the test. That's recorded. You should be able to hop on YouTube and watch that. This second class has been a review of English prep, items usually seen on the test, a review of punctuation and grammar that maybe you haven't thought about for a while. Our next session will not be recorded because we will be doing practice in person at both the Loft and the Lodge. We'll be at the Loft next Tuesday, February 21st after school, and at the Lodge next Wednesday, February 22nd after school to take an English practice test in person. We're going to time that and then grade it, go over our answers together and see if we can find out where we might need a little bit more practice and also how it feels time-wise on the test. If you're not able to join us for that, you can use the big red manual that they have there. We're going to do English practice test number 4, which is starts on page 604 and ends on page 615. I'll leave a bubble sheet for you so that you can fill out your own answers. And do make sure to set your phone alarm or something, time yourself for 45 minutes, and pay attention to the timer as it's going. Try not to spend more than 9 minutes per passage whenever you take that practice test. When you're done, the answers are on page 1026. You can just mark those. Subtract however many you get wrong from 75, so you know how many you got right. And then turn to that scale score conversion table. It will be on page 1030 for test 4, so that you can see what your ACT scale score would be. And back to that ACT score chart that we reviewed in the first class. Say that you did your math and you got however many wrong on the English test and you subtracted those from 75 and you got 43 to 45 right on the English test. If you find that on the table under the English column and then just kind of slide over to the scale score, you would see that as far as ACT was concerned, you got a 19 on the English test. So that way, you know, if you want to get a few more points, how many additional answers you'd have to get correct on the English test to kind of bump that scale score up a little bit. But that's how that score chart works. And remember that it's different for every test. All right. So whenever we did the general kind of overview together, I wanted to go to this retired ACT test. Like I said, ACT is getting a little bit strict about the tests that they're letting us use out there, but this one is still available on their website. And I can make copies of this for you if you just let them know at the Loft or the Lodge that you would like a copy of this so that you could take it home, time yourself, do the entire test. I would be happy to run these off for you and just drop them off there. Just let them know that you're looking for that. We're going to go ahead and go through a few of them here because in person we would be using the red manuals, but I want you to be able to have something to look at here. And then if you take a picture of this slide with your phone, you should be able to go to this YouTube link There's a gentleman there that helps people practice for the ACT and SAT, and he has scored a perfect score a few times. And he will just walk you through the first few. Actually, he walks through the whole test. But if you just want to kind of look at how he arrives at some of the answers on the English test, you can just look at that first video. And I'm going to try to share it with you here. We'll see if we can go to it. And